Hey, 8th grade. So our learning target today is I can solve equations with decimals. You should be on page 8. So for our steps today, the first thing we'll always do is stop, chop, chop. So we'll go ahead and, if it's a subtraction problem, we stop, chop, chop. You can go ahead and abbreviate that if you prefer. Step 1 is always to take care of any subtraction because I said no, we do not subtract in Ms. Volkman's class. Then we will simplify in step 2. So that's going to be kind of combining the things you've been working on recently in class. So step 2 is to simplify if necessary, which means use the distributive property if there's a parenthesis with a variable on the inside, then combine like terms if you need to. Not always do. Step 3 is to use inverse operations. In Ms. Volkman's class, we call that the hand method. So you're going to go ahead and use the hand method at step 3. If I'm going too fast, go ahead and pause that video. And then step 4, of course, is to check to make sure that everything makes sense. So those are our steps for today's work. So we're going to solve equations. It's going to have decimals in it. It's still just the hand method, but you definitely will need a calculator in our work for today. So if you haven't picked up a calculator yet, go ahead and get one. Okay, here we go. We're going to solve for the variable r. So we're going to use our hand method that says take your hand and cover the variable r and anything attached to it. We're going to stop, chop, chop if necessary. And our job is to get rid of, I'm going to go ahead and chop that again. It looks like my pen is kind of sticking a little bit here. Sorry, I'm using the tablet and it sticks sometimes. So we're going to actually put a stop sign around all of that. So the variable r and the division of 0.35 using the hand method then. We're going to get rid of this negative $9.01. Closest sign wins. The closest sign to $9.01 is negative, so that's the sign we use. So we're going to kind of ignore this sign. Add 9.01. Copy, paste. Working left to right then, as I work left to right, if I haven't used it, I drag it down. And we have 0 here. On the right-hand side, we have negative 16.2 plus 9.1 becomes negative 7.19. Negative 7.19 on the right. Solving for the variable r then, so our job is to solve for the variable r. We're going to get rid of division by 0.35. So we're going to multiply nice and high. So we're going to multiply by 0.35. Copy, paste. Go ahead and write that down. Copy, paste. It's just a decimal. You get to use your calculator. So on the left-hand side, those would cancel, and we get the variable r. On the right-hand side, we're going to have to type that in our calculator, and then we're going to have to round in the directions that says round to the nearest hundredth. So go ahead and type negative 7.19 multiplied by 0.35 on the right-hand side. It's going to be negative. And on my in my calculator, I get 2.5165. But our job is to round to the nearest hundredth, which means we're going to have to cut it off. So we have here tenths place here. In our hundredths, we're going to have to slice that off. The minute that we go from an equal sign and we round it, we change it to an approximation. So I squiggly line my equal sign, and it becomes negative 2.5. I'm going to round this digit to a 2. Negative 2.52 is our approximated answer. Our dilemma is that when we go to check this problem, we're going to run into some issues. So when I go to plug this in for the variable r, since I rounded it, it's not going to come out perfect. So just be aware of that. So why don't you go ahead and type in negative 2.52 in for the variable r. Divide by 0.35. Then subtract 9.01 and see if you get something very close to this. The tricky part is when we go to substitute this in for r. Since we rounded, it doesn't come out perfectly. Just check that out. So our answer for today for this problem here is r is approximately, notice it's a squiggly line, equal to negative 2.52. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question, which is going to be our last question today. Another very short lesson on hand method with decimals. I stop, chop, chop on the inside. I stop, chop, chop on the outside. And I have a lonely variable. My job is to kill that parenthesis as always. So we go ahead and run the distributive property, which is 4. Reattach the x. Then I take the 4 and multiply it to negative 3.7, which becomes negative 14.8. That kills the parenthesis. And then if I haven't used it, I drag it down. On the left-hand side, we have negative 10.3. All right, so that's step 1, using the distributive property and stop, chop, chop, or step 1, and part of step 2. The other part of step 2 says combine like terms. So my like terms would be negative 14.8 plus negative 0.8. It's like saying negative $14.80 plus negative 80 cents. Feel free to use your calculator on that. If you can't do that in your head, I totally understand. When we combine that, it becomes negative 15.6. If I haven't used it, I drag it down. If I haven't used it, I drag it down. And if I haven't used it, I drag it down. This turns then into the hand method. Remember, this is a decimal. Hand method, take my hand, cover the variable and anything attached. My job is to get rid of the negative 15.6. The closest sign wins. The opposite of a negative 15.6 is to add a 15.6. Working left to right then, I get 5.3. If I haven't used it, drag it down, and then I have 0. Solving for the variable x. This is a multiplication problem, 4 times x. So I'm going to use division to solve, divide by 4, copy, paste. And so then we end up getting negative 1.325 is equal to x. Solving, I'm going to cut this off then. So x is approximately equal to negative 1.33. When we round, it's approximately equal to. So we would have a approximation, and negative 1.3 is our approximated answer. When we go to plug that in here, remember we go to plug that in, it's not going to come out perfect to negative 10.3 because of the rounding on that, but that is how I want you to solve those. All right, so our summary for today, a couple things for summary. Let's take a look at the summary. Summary number 1. Remember that when we round long decimals, we want to round them to the nearest hundredth, and we need to change it to a squiggly approximation when we round. Couple other things. When we round, remember that the check will not always be the exact answer if we round. So when we go to plug back in, so when you do your check and you plug back in, it's not always going to be the exact answer because we rounded when we round in this step. So just be aware of that. As long as you're close, you're in good shape. And our last summary for today is just remember that we are going to use equal to if it's exact answer, and we're going to use approximate if we rounded it. So all we did today is the hand method. It's solving equations with decimals. I want you to round all of your answers to the nearest hundredth, please. All answers to the nearest hundredth. Your homework for tonight, guys, is to get all the way through page 10. All the way through page 10 is due tomorrow on solving equations with decimals. Have a fabulous night, 8th grade.